Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of What's Going On in Canadian Tech Market podcast. I'm your host. I'm AB Siddiqui. I help companies here in Vancouver building great tech and marketing teams. And today I'm delighted to join you guys with Gavin. Gavin is the CTO and co-founder of Sparrow Inc. Sparrow is doing some great work, and I'll let Gavin kind of introduce yourself and what do you guys do, Gavin?
Yeah, so first a bit about me. I started tech when I was young, taught myself to code when I was 12, studied computer engineering, and then just dove straight into the startup scene. I worked at an incubator, where through that incubator, I worked on various startups. I spent some time at Hootsuite. At Hootsuite, I was actually part of a team that was an acquired startup. So it was interesting. It was like being in a startup within a larger company and trying to take that, startup technology and scale it to a much larger scale. After that, I had a brief stint in Toronto where I tried to co-found another company and participated in a program called the Next 36. And then, when I came back to Vancouver, I took a little bit of time off and then dove straight back into startups again. And so I was the fifth employee for a company called CareCrew. So I joined them when their tech wasn't very established and they were pre-revenue. And then a couple of years ago, I left them. They were about 70 people, a few $1 million annual recurring revenue in order to co-found Sparrow. And so that's where I am now. And so, what is Sparrow? Well, we're an online home sharing platform, right? So the whole idea is this. So there are about 8 million empty bedrooms in Canada.
Mhm.
At the same time, we're going through an extreme housing affordability crisis.
Right.
And at that same time, too, our population is aging, right? A lot of people are aging out of their homes. They're trying to find ways, to keep living in their home, even though they may not be able to do certain things like take out the trash anymore, or other household chores, right? And so the whole idea here is, what if you take these two demographics, right? These people who, might need a little bit of help around the house and, younger people who need an affordable place to stay, bring them together so that they live together and it solves both of their problems, right? And so that was the initial focus, and then since then, the target demographics have broadened. It's not just older people and younger people; it's all kinds of people living together, right? But yeah, that's the concept of what we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I personally also so I recently moved to Vancouver to Canada, right, from Japan. And
Yeah.
when I was moving, so I actually that time I found about Sparrow actually when I was trying to look at my finding homes or finding a place to stay, and
Yeah.
somehow Sparrow popped up, and that's such a great to meet you finally, the co-founders of that app. It's so exciting.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
so yeah, Gavin, like I'm curious to know because also definitely it's a great product which you guys and it has a very interesting mission behind. But there are so many similar apps, right? Airbnb or Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
How do you guys differentiate
Yeah.
Sparrow from
So
those?
I would say the differentiation is all around the whole concept of compatibility, right?
Hmm.
So with these other platforms, generally you're just focused on the location itself, right?
Right.
Here's a place I want. You go there and then you do a viewing. If it's PGG or something, you'll do a viewing. But if it's Airbnb or hotels.com or something, you'll just book it, right? And that works in situations where you're not actually sharing the same space, right? But if you ever live with anyone else, you know that just living with random people, it's just a gamble, right? You can end up with people that you just don't get along with, and that could work for people who are desperate to find affordable housing, but that's just not very, that's just not a thing that we're interested in, right? So the whole
Right.
idea is that, as a host or a housemate, you find someone to live with that you're actually compatible with. And, we look at various things, right? It's like the schedules that you conduct your day with. Are you working from home or not? Like what kind of interests do you have, right? And
Yeah.
we take all of that, use it to create a score, and the score is constantly being tweaked, right, based on what we've learned. And then we use that to make cool matches, right? And for me, that's what's exciting. It's not just, oh, let's find you a place to live. It's actually this whole idea that you can live better together, right?
Hmm.
Like that by if you find the right person or the
Yeah.
right group of people to live with, it enhances your life, right?
Okay.
And yeah, and so in a sense, it's like you can imagine it's like a bit of like online dating
Right.
brought to
Living. So
living.
who
Yeah.
are your target customer for host and guest? For
Uh,
example, I can have an understanding of the host
Sorry,
would
you
be
had
like,
cut off for 10 seconds. Could you repeat the
oh,
question?
really? Okay. So
Yeah.
who are your target customers for like host and guest?
Yeah, so on the host side, originally it was older hosts were like the first identified demographic, right? Older female hosts generally who are living alone. They seem to be quite open to having people come into their homes. Besides that, there are also immigrants of all kinds of backgrounds, and so we found that in general, middle-aged to older immigrants are very open to the idea of, bringing in, accepting newer immigrants to Canada into their home because they remember how it was when they came here and how hard it was, and they want to help other people, right? Um, and then it just keeps expanding. Like we keep at this point, there are people who are just actually struggling to keep their homes financially, right?
Right.
So the interest rate environment in Canada, well, I'm sure right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Anyone who has a variable mortgage rate uh, is going through a tough time when that renewal comes, and so a lot of people come to us from that angle, actually, right?
So you
And
you are getting customers like inbound customers, mostly like the host or the people who'd like to list with you.
yeah, so the hosts are inbound, right?
Okay.
Right now we do have limited digital marketing, but we haven't scaled it out too much. We're just keeping up with the host interest, and
Okay.
so originally when we started the business, I would say that was maybe the biggest question mark. Actually, it's we've done some research, but it remained to be seen. How open were hosts to actually accepting people in their homes, and
Right.
they're very open, and
Mhm.
a lot of people had been. I guess another thing to point out is most of our hosts had never rented out a room before in their life,
Okay.
right? And
Hmm.
so for me, that's something I'm happy about, right? Because while we're trying to build a business, we're also trying to impact, you know, positive social change, right?
Right.
And introducing new housing supply into the Canadian market, again, tapping into those 8 million empty bedrooms.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge, that could play a huge role, right, in the
Sure.
state of our country. And so, um, yeah, a lot of these hosts they just don't know how to do certain things,
Hmm.
or they're scared. They're scared of, can I find someone that I can trust, that I'll get
Right.
along with, who isn't a criminal? Is their
Yeah.
ID verified? How do
And
we
how do you guys
handle?
make money out of it?
So whenever somebody signs an agreement, we take a cut of the rent right now. So that's the current revenue model. And then as we scale and go along, that revenue model will slowly shift, right? Between from upfront payments to more affiliate type revenue streams. For example, we've
Okay.
already established insurance affiliate streams, right? And so, if you're a housemate and you need insurance, we're like, hey, why don't you use our provider, and we get a cut of that, right? And so, a long story short, currently, upfront costs to the host, and then slowly but surely trying to reduce those upfront costs and make more money on the tail end.
Yeah, because on the from the host, like it's only, is it the first month's rent or pay as you go, like
So it's actually based on the length of the agreement signed, right? And
okay.
so people can sign agreements anywhere between 3 and 12 months. And so, you sign a 12-month agreement or a 10-month agreement, you're paying 1 month's rent up front.
Mhm.
But if you sign like a 4-month agreement, it's half a month's rent.
Okay.
And then, everyone's situation can be a bit different. So there are some cases, for example, where we've just, instead of charging the upfront fee, have taken a cut
Hmm.
of just the rent on an ongoing basis.
Right.
And that's really just experimentation. Like over the past year or so, we've pivoted, our fees, and we just keep experimenting to see, what sticks.
So Gavin, you mentioned that you have done different types of startups with HotSuite. I think it's a digital marketing company, and
Yeah.
then with Cure app or something. You mentioned it's a medical or healthcare
Care
related
crew. Yeah.
care crew. Yeah,
Yes.
and then the housing or hospitality. So what triggered you like to start up this company?
This company. So I was at Care Crew, and I was reaching this point where I was like, okay, I think I've done what I wanted to do here. In terms of bringing the value that I thought I would mostly bring, and it would be time to start my own company. And around that same time, my co-founder actually reached out to me,
Cool.
and this is interesting because I didn't even know the guy, and I'm in Vancouver and he's in Toronto, and he reaches out to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm looking to start a company in this space. I've heard about you. Would you like to talk?" Right? And I was like, "Okay, sure." Right? Like, why not? It's like, you reached out to me.
Yeah.
You want to be on a podcast? I was like, "Sure." Like you never know what opportunity comes your way, and so I would say within 1 week of meeting him virtually, I quit my job and I'm like, let's do this, right?
Wow.
And the reason is like sometimes you just know when you meet people that you have the right aligned values and that you could do something. And I really strongly felt, and I still strongly feel that him and I working together and building this team,
Hmm.
that if anybody could make this happen, right, and like make an impact in Canada in this way, it's us, right? I truly
Okay.
believe that, and I felt, I got to give it a shot,
Right.
because I always think, like what could have happened, right?
I see.
And so I just, it was a tough decision, but I mean, over that 1 week, we had
Hmm.
multiple phone calls, multi hours long, just grilling him on everything. And yeah, we went for
Okay.
it.
Awesome, awesome. So it's a very interesting story because I think, economies like Canada or even I came from Japan, right, where starting up cost is very expensive compared
Yeah,
to countries like India or Bangladesh or Pakistan, because there you can just start up from your bedroom or from a basement because you don't have mortgages or you don't have like high tax. Whereas in Canada or even in Japan, when I was there, it was so expensive, right? But you guys took a leap of faith and now you guys are here. It's so exciting to see the journey where what it takes.
yeah. No, it's it's definitely a bit of a leap, but you start to realize over time too. It's like you have to like make these leaps in your life, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're going to stagnate, right? And everybody wants something different in their lives. Like for me, it's not about getting rich or anything like that. It's just I want to work on interesting problems with
Mhm.
people I want to work with. I want to do cool things and make cool changes in the world, right? And then if I look at that and I know that's what makes me happy. Like it doesn't feel like such a leap, right?
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to What's Going On in Canadian Tech Market Podcast. I'm your host, AB Siddiqui, and I help companies in British Columbia as well as Manitoba finding great tech and marketing flexible resources. What I mean by flexible resources is you have a great team already of your marketing and tech talent, but you want to deliver something, some project, some product faster, more efficiently, and you can't hire or you don't want to hire someone full time. Then my flexible resources come in and help you build that project, build that product within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever you want, whatever you need, and then they move to the next project. So if you're looking for a flexible or even a fractional resource, someone who can come over for a few times a week, call me in today. My number is 604-259-2500.
It feels like just the logical thing to do to reach your goals in life and be happy, right?
Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to the tech side of our talk right now. So I'm curious to know, you mentioned that you build a team like it's a remote team right now. So
Yeah,
how do you build a data-driven I know, so maybe I'll just skip that one later. But
yeah.
kind of right now as a remote first company, like how do you find asynchronous process that work?
Oh, like asynchronous processes?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
asynchronous processes. Yeah.
yeah. So the thing there, so that was tricky, right? Come when we first started, the inclination was to try to recreate what was like that in-person process online, and that's a big pitfall, right? And so that involves relying on video chats, meetings every day, instant messaging all the time. And then what you really need to do is you need to shift away from that mindset of recreating that in-office culture, and just really embrace the fact that asynchronous means you're not necessarily getting immediate responses, but you don't need immediate responses. It's like an exercise of trust. So if you have a team that you fully trust and they're getting work done and you can actually measure the output of that work, then like, hey, you don't need to sync up on a call every day. You don't need to receive a reply all the time. People will get stuff done in their own way, right? And then in terms of the actual process, like for example, in an engineering organization, you don't really want to rely on this whole concept of let's just hop on a quick call, right? It's actually better to rely on documentation, so communication via documentation. So someone creates a pull request, actually document what's happening on that pull request. And that's important for so many reasons. One is it actually, in my opinion, provides a greater depth of conversation, right? Because you can fall into the traps of just being emotionally swayed through your voice, right? You have to be objective in your reasoning. And it also creates better information architecture, because when you're in an office, everybody can hear everything. So generally your team is in sync. But when you're remote, a call that I have with somebody in Toronto, that the knowledge from that is not shared with somebody in Surrey, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's cultural first and foremost. Yeah.
And how do you build the right team out of it?
Yeah. So finding the right team, I think for a startup is tricky, right? I think you really need to understand what motivates people, and you need to find people who are passionate, right? And so for me, I'm lucky in that, I don't know if it's luck, I say it's luck, well, I feel blessed, is that I'm working with people that I really love to work with, but I have found them through working at other startups, right?
Okay.
And so I think, for your core team, you need to have people who know what they're doing, right? There's different philosophies towards it. Some people start up companies and rely on, very junior talent. Just from my experience personally, I found that, if you have one good senior talent, that senior talent replaces at least like 3 junior talents and sets up your organization to really scale, right? But how do you afford that, as a startup? Well, that's where the motivation comes in. It's about meeting the right people. How do you meet the right people? I would recommend anybody who's thinking of starting a startup, maybe go try and work at a few startups first, build up your network, right? And find those people who are passionate to start a company with you, right?
I see. I think this is a very interesting insight. Not many people would, know that. Like, if you want to build a startup, work at startups. So that's pretty cool.
I think it's huge, right? You just learn things that you're not going to learn in school. You're not going to, I was part of like an accelerator program, and I learned a lot of stuff, but it still wasn't the same as just being in a startup, right? And it's a very valuable environment. And then there's a whole network of people that you build this whole like support group, right?
Right. So you touch a lot about data, right? So trust and data. So how do you build a data-driven organization from the ground up?
Yeah, so that also comes down to culture. What's interesting is that I think building an asynchronous remote work culture and a data-driven organization go hand in hand, because they kind of share this whole concept of being objective, following, the data, being very reasonable. And so I think for developing a data-driven organization in a startup, it comes down to the culture, and it comes down to prioritizing the right things. So often what I've seen is startups go for like the short-term thinking, It's like, hey, let's just get this done as quickly as possible. But then as soon as they need to pivot, they have to if it's in the code, they have to rewrite a bunch of code. a bunch of things break, etc. And so you often forego a few key things, like one of them, being testing, the other one being security, I think as startups, the number one thing they need to prioritize is adaptability, right? You need to keep adapting until you find a business model. And then once you find that business model, you need to scale quickly, right?
Okay.
And so if you're prioritizing adaptability, that means you have to have just like this whole culture of experimentation, right? Where you try different ideas, you quickly kill them. And how do you know if your experiments are working? You need to measure data, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the whole thing. And then there are different tips I won't get into here because it would take forever, but there are certain tips you can follow in order to actually build that the technical infrastructure to do that.
Mm.
But it all comes with like how you prioritize how your business works, and even how you incentivize people within your company. For example, it's very common for people to be rewarded when their ideas are the ideas that are successful. But I actually think it's better to, instead of doing that, just reward people for how well they collaborate with others. It should be less about, your idea is the one that's made it into production, so, oh, good job. And more about like, hey, we collectively did this. Good job to everybody. Good job on, how you pivoted your idea, right? And this kind of reward system, the way you just even encourage people, promotes discourse, right? It promotes like a culture where the best ideas win and not just your idea so you can gain clout, right?
Got it. So you mentioned about data, and data comes with a lot of responsibility as well. So
Yes.
how are you protecting the data of your company, and especially from the current cybersecurity threats, which has also been triggered through AIs? There are so many AI scams we're seeing recently.
Yeah, so there's so many layers to the security, and it's actually tricky because you don't want to say too much about it. But one thing, there's basic concepts that not everybody follows, but you should follow. From the technical side, rotating your secrets, right? On a company side, processes, right? And then in terms of data residency, we keep all our data in Canada. And in terms of analyzing vendors, so like really quickly, because it's so broad, security is such a broad
topic as well,
right? I think one thing that people don't really think about is the whole like company process side of things, actually. So like on the tech side, we handle our infrastructure on AWS, and we have a balance between, what do they manage and what do we manage? And a huge reason we rely on them is actually because of the constant security patches, right?
Yeah.
And so, that stuff I think most, technical folks can understand. And then in terms of vendors and how we handle people's IDs, we don't store any of that at all, right? Because what we do is we use a third-party service who's complete like objective, like their only business mission is to verify people's identities, right? And so by passing our users along directly to them, we already know that they have the highest level of compliance, right?
Okay.
And it's like analyzing that compliance, talking to the engineers, and that as a larger company, they can better protect, these key pieces of data than us, right? And so you have to strive to be as secure as possible, but also be realistic about, who can actually hold certain pieces of data better. And you have to get away from the mentality of just hoarding data. Keep the data you need, get rid of the data you don't want. Any data you have is a liability, right? So it's risky. And then as a company, processes are important, even for a startup. And the reason is most data breaches, I don't know if it's actually true that most, but many data breaches are socially engineered, right?
I see.
Right. And so certain engineers having access to too much data, and then, they get a phone call from somebody with a AI modulator of my voice or
Oh yeah,
something. So, you know, there you have to think about like all of these attack vectors, right? And
exactly.
you know, it's a constant process. You're constantly trying to improve. But the tip I would give people is, you know, the tech part is important, but also think about the processes in your company and how people might socially engineer their way into
Right.
your data.
Awesome. I mean, that was a very important, I think, answer for everyone who is currently building a company or currently working as an engineer folk. So I just want to know, this would be my last question about your tech side is like, so you mentioned you have a small team.
Yes.
And so how's your approach to the engineering team? You mentioned you're operating like 100% infrastructure as code, highly tested on Kubernetes and everything else. So with
Yes.
a small team, how do you manage everything?
Yeah, and so this comes down to this whole concept of keep your team small, but keep it elite, right?
Okay.
And so for us, one of our key values is striving for excellence. And you know, everything we do, we try to do it very well. And by exuding that energy, you attract people with a similar energy, right?
Hmm.
And so most of our platform was built with just a couple people, right? Well, a couple engineers, not including, you know, design work and product research and all of this, right? And the reason you're able to extract so much from so little is because you ensure that the team stays elite. And that could be difficult, actually. You know, there have been hard decisions, you know. The team that we have now is not the team we started the company with, right? And you need to be able to make those hard decisions to ensure that your culture is maintained, right? That everybody is on the same page, just striving for excellence. They know that the person they're working with is very high quality, because if that's the case, you're going to get a lot out of people, right? So
I
that's the
see.
non-technical answer, and the reason it's non-technical is I find a lot of this stuff comes down to culture and business decisions. Are
Hmm.
you willing to let go somebody when you know that it's not going to work out? Or are you going to drag them on for 3 or 4 months over some
Hmm.
improvement plan? It's like, as a startup, you can't afford to do that. You can't afford to compromise your culture, right? And so, in terms of structuring a team, I actually firmly believe that you need to have, you know, one quite senior engineer on your team, and then your next hire could or probably should be a junior to intermediate engineer who has a lot of potential. So find someone who's hungry to learn, has potential, and then between yourself, well, I'm a technical co-founder, so I count as a senior, and then our other senior, you create basically a cost-effective team that can get a lot done. You're investing in that junior talent while still having that senior talent to establish the right processes. And then once you have that core team, you can do whatever you want, actually, as in you can expand your team here, overseas. Like, it just depends on your business needs and what you're trying to accomplish.
I see.
But that nucleus of your team, I really believe, keep it lean, keep it high quality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's quality over quantity, in short, like
Yeah,
just have the best
exactly.
quality. Okay.
Right. And you know, it sounds obvious, but then so many people go the opposite route, right?
Hmm.
They just hire a bunch of junior engineers with not much experience. Not saying that they're bad, but you know, it's a hard game. You know, some experience really helps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be the one suggestion for someone looking to enter maybe your company, your industry, or, in general, looking for a job?
Yeah. So if you're looking for a job in tech, I would say I would say don't be in love with technology, just be in love with the value it brings to users. If you're focused on bringing value to users, you're going to go far, because businesses, you think they're hiring you to write code, but they're usually hiring you to bring value to people, and then you happen to be doing that through writing code. This mentality is especially important with you know, all of this chat GPT, um, the impact from ChatGPT. Maybe you're not going to be even writing code in the next few years, right? So how do you keep yourself relevant, right? I think that's super important in tech. And then in hospitality, you know, if you're getting into like our space in general, um, empathy is important, patience is key, right?
Okay.
That's what you encounter so many different kinds of people. Sometimes you just encounter certain ways of thinking where you're like, why are they doing that? Like you just can't start to wrap your mind around it. But you have to be patient and understand, be very open to different kinds of people and different ways of thinking.
Got it, Gavin. Thank you so much, Gavin, for your time today. I think we touched on some very important and interesting aspects in our podcast today. And people who are watching this, if you found some values, if you have any questions, you can always comment. I will put up a link of Gavin's LinkedIn as well, if you guys want to connect. And yeah, thank you so much, Gavin. Hope to catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great